Welcome into Jungle Tales, the Pirate Baseball podcast. We appreciate everyone tuning in as we're coming to you here on a Wednesday night. On deck for East Carolina is the Tulane Green Wave. And right now, as we get you ready for that matchup between East Carolina and Tulane, we are joined by former East Carolina play-by-play voice. And I think now in your fourth year with the Tulane Green Wave, Corey Gloor.
Fourth year, indeed. The time of me knowing a bulk of who is on the East Carolina baseball roster is almost up. I have one guy, I believe, on that roster, not including this coaching staff, that was there and overlapped with me for a year, and he's been injured all year, and Riley Johnson. But so yes, it's been a full era of baseball since I have been the voice of Pirate baseball, and it's going to be a little weird, I won't lie, going back this weekend.
And Corey, even for the most diehard of Pirate fans, as I'm sure you're well aware of, and even more so as you've done your prep work for this series, is that was the case for a lot of East Carolina fans this year, learning so many new roster pieces with pushing 30 new players.
Yeah, this turnover is unlike any certainly I experienced in my time there. Now that was pre-transfer portal NIL, and certainly not one that East Carolina's ever experienced. So yeah, just going through what the team is right now in preparation for this weekend, it is like a completely different group. And I've talked a little bit to Jay Ullman, head coach of Tulane here heading into this weekend. I talked a little bit to Connor Rasmussen heading into this weekend, what this weekend means to him. But the guys that they know from this roster you can maybe fill up on two hands at best. So to see the sheer turnover that's existed here during the course of the year is still a little bit eye-opening. And I think what the season has been for the Pirates has reflected that you can look up and they're on a 4-game losing streak, and then you look up and they're on a 6-game winning streak. I mean, it's been very up and down this year, and that's the nature of the beast when you have this much newness and this much youthful newness, what the Pirates have.
Taking a look at the Green Wave, 24-17, 8-7 overall. But really, before we even dive specifically into this year's team, a few seasons ago, pretty interesting circumstances. The way Jay Ullman got the job, but that initial season in 2023, 19-42. But you had the memorable run through the tournament last year, 36-26. So a 17-game improvement there, 15-12 within the league. What's the general consensus just on the program as a whole here in year 3 of Jay Ullman?
Well, the jump that it took from 2023 to 2024 was major. Most wins increase in the nation from one year to the next. And the fact that both of them resulted in Clearwater championships and NCAA tournaments, that the bar was set pretty high this year for a group that lost a sizable amount, not as much as East Carolina lost, but they lost their main power threats in the lineup to the draft. They lost arguably their best weekend pitcher to the draft in Chandler Welch. And so, but they felt really strong about what was on deck to replace all that, whether it was through the portal or a really good freshman class that came in. What's resulted hasn't exactly gelled the way I think folks here were expecting it to. They have had some flashes of some really great moments that kind of looked like the team a lot of folks were anticipating to see throughout the course of the year. But then some moments that have not exactly looked as sharp and as clean as Jay Ullman was hoping for, particularly on the mound. There's been kind of one step forward, one step back in the pitching staff this year. And and the offense doesn't have the thump that it did last year. We were talking about this off air, Bubba. It's much more of hit a couple of doubles and manufacture runs that way. They are lead the league in doubles, but the home run pop was not there from what we saw the last couple of years with a T.O. Banks and a Brady Margette. Last year, Colin Tuft at the leadoff spot as the catcher. These guys brought some huge power. That hasn't materialized with this group just yet. But if they can keep hitting extra base hits, keep getting on base, that's where their best pressure has come. It is not the draw a walk and then hit a 2-run home run team that we saw last year. It's had to operate differently offensively, and that's created some bumps in the road because there have been plenty of times this year where pitchers have carved them up. And so it has not been as consistent as I think a lot of folks were anticipating it would be this year. But with the schedule they have remaining, with 3 of the 4 teams they have left in the league sitting above them in the standings, and they're all 1 game up on them on the standings, ECU, Charlotte, and FAU are all still remaining here, that Tulane knows that there's an opportunity to climb back up the ladder here in the final month of the year. They've just got to play much more clean baseball than what we've seen for a lot of the season.
Yeah, the Green Wave got off to a 15-5 start following the series victory over Xavier. And Xavier, that was back in mid-March, and now you look up the Musketeers are top 20 in the RPI of last check, tied with UConn atop the Big East. And since then there have been some struggles, but you've won 3 of the 5 league series with series wins against Wichita State, a sweep of Rice, and 2 out of 3 against UAB. You were swept by the Bulls in Tampa, and then dropped 2 of 3 most recently in San Antonio. There are a lot of similarities in the resumes, for East Carolina and Tulane.
Yeah, and I think what's been a little bit confounding here is that there hasn't been as much turnover here as we saw with East Carolina, and it's not nearly as young of a team. Now, what's happened over the last couple of weeks is that a lot of the new guys have pretty much taken over the primary roles, and that includes a couple of true freshmen that have become the top 2 hitters in the top of the order right now for Tulane, and a couple outfielders in Jason Wax and Tanner Chun. And so what we have seen really, I guess, since the start of March, if not a week or so into March, has been some of the holdovers from last year's team kind of take a step back a little bit, and some of the newer faces have taken more of a charge and become more fixtures of the lineup. It was a very mixed bag in San Antonio. The fact that they got a win out of that series, I think, is the bar to clear with what UTSA has been this season. They played great in that game 2 Friday to win a 5-3 game, and holding that offense to 3 runs is very hard to do. But then the 2 games around that, they lose 13-5 on Thursday night in game 1, and then they get absolutely bludgeoned on Saturday, 25-7. It's one of the worst losses in program history. And so that kind of exemplified what the year has been so far for Tulane, where it just seems like there's a moment there where it looks like the team that we thought it was going to be, and then there's a moment where it just looks like a complete reversal. And so, we're this deep into the year. Tulane has been very strong the last couple of years at finding their stride at the end of the year, and I think Jay Ullman is definitely hoping that it happens a touch earlier in 2025 as opposed to the last couple of years when it was they would take off in May. Now they know what this weekend is, FAU at home the following weekend, what these 2 weekends mean, and then you end the year with Charlotte. He needs to see a much more assertive, much more impressive group starting Friday night in Greenville from what we have seen the last couple of weeks.
One of the glaring issues for ECU this year in many of those 17 losses has been the lack of command on the mound. You talk about how the Green Wave allowed 38 runs in the first and third games of that series against UTSA in the 5-3 victory. The free pass battle was just 4-3. In the 25-7 game, it was 19-3, and then 11-4 in the 13-5 loss. That looked very similar.
Yeah, what walks have been a huge killer for Tulane on the mound this year. That and they lead the league in hit batters too, and so that's the free pass battle. You can probably do this with every team in the nation, but assuredly with Tulane, when that free pass number starts rising on the mound, then it usually results in a loss. And what Saturday was, I've never seen quite anything like what happened Saturday, where it was 15 walks, 4 hit batters, and that was before Tulane recorded an out in the 5th inning. And so it was 4 innings of that. And obviously it ended in 7 innings. Like, I mean, that game was over very quickly. And Tulane had a lead in that game. They led 4-1 in the 2nd inning, and then it all fell apart. The command has been a real sore spot for the Tulane pitching staff. Now, they've been up in the top 3 of the league all year in strikeouts and strikeouts per 9. The stuff can be really filthy on the mound, but the control has been just a major headache right now. And so, again, you can have a game like Friday in San Antonio where they walk just 2 batters, and then you have a game on Saturday where they walk 15. And it kind of is hard to wrap your head around what has happened there. East Carolina's had that problem as well. The ECU pitching staff has been, I think, better at not allowing as many hits as Tulane's pitching staff has been. But yeah, that kind of exemplifies, I think, primarily just what has been a bit of a hindrance to Tulane really accelerating back up the standings this year, and that you're just not entirely sure what the control is going to be like on the mound from day in and day out.
In a few minutes, we'll circle back to Pat Hallmark's Roadrunners. With you having had the opportunity to see them up close in San Antonio last weekend, and East Carolina hosting UTSA here in a couple weeks at Clark LeClaire. I definitely want to talk more about them, but let's finish getting a look at the Green Wave. And you talk about Connor Rasmussen, and he started all 41 games, leading the club with a 338 average, 12 doubles, which ranks second. And he obviously began his career in the purple and gold, even though he didn't play a whole lot. So he's someone that Pirate fans are familiar with.
He's had an interesting season. He started out of the gate very strong, took a little bit of a dip once league play began. And the last couple of weekends, he had a pretty good weekend in San Antonio. He had a really strong showing against UAB the weekend before. And so he's starting to look a little bit more like himself now and what he has meant to this team. I think when Tulane lost those big bats to the draft after last year's group came to an end in Corvallis, I mean, everyone kind of knew that Connor was going to be the centerpiece of the team, at least in the middle of the order. And so that the lineup has kind of followed how Connor is as a player. He's not a straight up home run hitting guy. When he is really thriving, he is hitting extra base hits down the line or in the right center gap and getting on with doubles. And he's got some decent speed. And so what the lineup has kind of followed him a little bit. When he took a step back, kind of the rest of the team took a step back. Now he's starting to show signs of looking more like himself in the back half of the year. And then you're seeing other guys start to slot into place around him. And so he is without a doubt, he's the only guy on this team that has started all 41 at his position. Gavin Schultz is the only other person on the team that started all 41 games, but he's been third base, DH, outfield a couple times. Connor you can write him in Sharpie, second base for this team, and the rest of the group kind of follows his lead a little bit now. And so they all know what this weekend means to him. They also know that a lot of guys on the other side of the field for this series don't have a ton of attachment to him. More fans will than the guys in that Pirate dugout. But yeah, I mean, everyone knows what this weekend is for him. And I think they definitely want to put on their best performance around him and the lineup so that it doesn't fall and all those eyes don't fall on him as everyone kind of hunts down what he's doing in a different uniform. That was the murmur today in practice, is they definitely want to put their strongest foot forward for Connor this weekend because of just what this weekend means to him.
He definitely was a Pirate killer a year ago, and Pirate fans have definitely been talking about that performance last year in New Orleans. Another familiar name is Haas. 319, a team high, 17 doubles, and he's played in all but 2 games and started all 39 of those.
Yeah, he's been in right field. He's been at first base, occasional DH. He missed a couple of games after he slammed his head on the ground diving for a ball against Lamar. He only missed, 2 games after that. I think what's been, he's taken a huge leap from what he was last year. He came on exceptionally strong at the end of last year. You could kind of connect a dot from when he started playing extremely well to Tulane's run in May. And he had a very good series against East Carolina last year to close out the home season. And he has been as pretty consistent this year when he's been able to stay on the field. He's had his fluctuations during the course of a weekend, but you got one of the best doubles hitters in the league. He plays a pretty good glove. This is a 6th-year guy who is kind of just seen everything by this point. And so he has taken much more of a leadership role. His fall got him into a regular spot in the lineup to start this year, and he has not relinquished it. And so to have that type of veteran presence for, I touched on a couple of the young guys in Wax and Chun who have become kind of the top 2 hitters at the top of the order here, but having a guy like Matthias help guide them through this has been pretty critical for the development of those young guys too.
You mentioned Tanner Chun. His emergence leads the team with 7 bombs. Tell us a little more about Tanner.
Well, you're going to see him come to the plate this weekend, and he's not really going to jump off the page in terms of size. I mean, he is not the biggest guy in the world, but there's not an ounce of body fat on him. He's got the quickest bat on the team. So what that collides with is some impressive power. And, he was talking to media today, and he was asked, would he be surprised to find out you had 7 home runs at this point your first collegiate season? And he said absolutely. And then Jay Ullman was asked that question. He said absolutely not, because he sees what the type of player he is, and that is a guy that, I mean, the bat speed is vicious. And so add into it, like our hitting coach calls him wiry strong, and the strongest player that he has had per pound on this roster. Again, he's not going to jump off the page in terms of size, but when he connects, it can go a long, long ways. And that has happened, especially over the last 4 weeks. Like, he has taken a much stronger foothold in the lineup here and has taken over in center field and left field. Pretty much the entire outfield is starting to look different from what it was a year ago, with Tanner Chun, Jason Wax, and Theo Bryant's the other guy who's getting a lot more time over the last couple of weeks. He's had a great month of April. And so these are new faces that are all starting to grab spots that felt up for grabs during an inconsistent month of March. And to see a guy like Chun, a guy like Wax in their first years have performances like this, this has been, I'm sure Cliff is dealing with this here as well with all the freshmen he's got. Tulane doesn't have as many freshmen as ECU does, but finding a balance of getting freshmen time to develop while also going out and winning games. That's where Tulane was with those 2 guys. And Nate Johnson's the third of this mix. He's an infielder who hasn't had as strong of a first year as those other 2, but finding ways for those 2 guys to develop in the outfield, and now they become 2 of Tulane's more reliable hitters all in their first year. It's so important to keep kind of the narrative of a program going as the years evolve, because even in this day and age, you're trying to solidify some element of culture and foundation. So having these guys in their first year have years like this, you always worry about what happens at the end of the year and if they're going to be around, but it also helps kind of prove to them that look at what you've become with us, and we won games with you with you guys at the top of the order. And so that to see this from those 2 has been, I think, huge for Tulane, especially just immediately with how this up and down the lineup has been. To get these 2 to do this has been sorely needed over the month of April.
Before we shift over and talk about the pitching staff, anything else positionally that Pirate fans should keep an eye on this weekend?
Yeah, I guess the one guy that we haven't really touched on a ton that will probably warrant a little bit of focus is the catcher, Hugh Pinckney. This is a Rutgers transfer who, in the first 5, 6 weeks of the year, he and Andrew McKenna were essentially alternating each game. They were kind of catcher 1A, catcher 1B. McKenna's a sixth-year guy. Might remember him from Florida Atlantic last year. And so he's a grizzled vet. Pinckney, a junior, a younger guy, Canadian catcher. And he, like Theo Bryant, these two guys in the month of April have come out on a tear. And so they have taken over some key spots at catcher and center field for Tulane. And so Pinckney has provided a nice lift. He's been batting in the middle of the order here of late. Bryant had a terrific weekend against Rice a couple weeks ago. Pretty strong showing against UAB as well. He was he had an all right series against UTSA, but that's a grad transfer from Tennessee Tech that finally has been starting to get going here. And so those two guys in the middle of the lineup have really emerged in April. There's one guy that probably I'm sure a lot of fans are wondering about that hasn't been mentioned, and there's unfortunately a reason why, and that's Jackson Lynn, who's been around for 4 years, and the strength of this dude is frightening. And he was the hero in the conference championship game last year. He terrorized East Carolina in that final game of the series last year, both at the plate and in the field. He has had a very down year, and so he doesn't see a lot of time anymore. And so maybe that's a breath of fresh air for ECU fans with what he has done to ECU in the past. I'm sure you'll see him at some point this weekend because, boy, I'm love to see him hit in that ballpark. But it has not been the year that a lot of folks anticipated for Jackson Lynn. Theo Bryant and Jason Wax and Tanner Chun taking over in the outfield has been major, because I think Tulane was anticipating quite a bit of power potential from Jackson and just hasn't been there this year.
We discussed already, some of the command issues of the pitching staff and how that really wreaked some havoc, or caused some issues rather in that series against UTSA. And as a result, the team ERA I see is just a touch over 6. Opponents hitting about 260 off green wave pitching, but very much like ECU, a lot of strikeouts, 409, which ranks second in the American. And I noticed that at least Friday and Saturday have been fairly consistent of late. As far as the starters, Ethan Norby, of course, the only consistent piece of the ECU rotation. And I saw that the Sunday game, well, I guess Saturday game against UTSA was a Johnny Holstaff with 9 or 10 guys. And obviously the way that game was going was a big part of that. But and tell us about that weekend 3 for Tulane.
Yeah, I mean, Luke Flata is still on Fridays. That's been the case all year. That was the case all of last year. Lefty, the term I guess is crafty. His stuff is not touching 90. What he's great with control. He's walked just 8 this year in 53 plus innings, and puts him near the top of the league. He struggled with that against UTSA, but I know you said we'll talk about UTSA in a little bit, but that's a lineup right there. That's one heck of a lineup. And so that they definitely kind of put him in a vice last Thursday. He gave up runs very early in that game and then somehow stretched it to the 5th to at least keep Tulane around in that first game. The strikeout numbers have ballooned for him because, frankly, he's worked a changeup in a lot. And when you add in a changeup that's sitting at 82 to back up a two-seam fastball that's at 88, like, you can get a lot of folks in front or a lot of folks behind with just that small differential in the MPH. And then he throws a slider to lefties as well. And so, the thing with Flata is that he's usually very good in the zone. That means he gives up hits, and he's given up quite a few hits this year. But the strikeout numbers have increased because of the evolution of a third pitch in that changeup. Then Trey Sahajic has been in Saturdays for all but 1 week this year. I mean, this kid is a monster. By the time Tulane saw East Carolina last year, he was pretty much out of the mix on the mound. He was initially the closer to start last year. Then he started getting hit, and he was pretty much shuffled out of the mix by mid-April last year. He worked very diligently on his breaking stuff in the offseason to go along with a fastball that can sit 96, and he's 6'8", 240. Like, this is a huge dude. And then he's got a slider cutter sort of mix and a changeup, and then he'll occasionally throw a slurving curveball in there. He pitched great against UTSA, and for him, it's been he's been. I don't want to say the pitching staff has kind of followed his lead, but he has been up and down this year as well. The biggest issue with Trey is he hasn't been able to go deep into games really since the beginning of the year. When he gets to a third time through the order, things start to become a struggle for him. And so if Tulane can get 5-6 innings out of Sahajic on a Saturday like they did last week in San Antonio, they feel pretty good about moving forward. The Johnny Holstaff game on Saturday in San Antonio was not intended to be blunt, but that's what happened when things just started going off the rails in what turned out to be an 11-run second inning. This has not been set all year. This third starter, at the beginning of the year, it was a big right-hander in J.D. Rodriguez, a JUCO transfer from Southern California. He struggled in that role. Tulane has been trying to find something here all year long. And last week it was Will Clements, who pitched outstanding against Rice a couple weekends ago. He struck out 10 in his first time and a half through the order. And he started off very well against UTSA and then just fell apart. Like, the command was way off the mark. His stuff can be ultra nasty. He's on some pro radars because he can throw a sinker at 96. He's got a wicked slider, but finding it in the strike zone with consistency has been his problem. Carter Benbrook's been in that spot, lefty grinder pitcher. You might see a Michael Lombardi here, but he's the team's closer. And then you got Taylor Montiel, who has been a revelation as a stretch reliever. Left-hander has been around the program for a while. He's got a 127 earned run average, and it's not fake. His fastball slider mix has been devastating. Beyond that, Tulane's really kind of pick name out of a hat territory in terms of who they can go to for strong relief work, or even to get them off to a good start. I'm long-winded here. You know this about me, Bubba. We've talked for 10 years. I can go. The Tulane's biggest problem on the mound is that they give up runs in the first inning. The most runs allowed against Tulane this year have come in the first inning of any inning of the game. They're on 5 straight games of giving up runs in the first inning. And so they have not been able to get off on the right foot a lot this season. I may find the number for you here, because this is something to keep in mind as the weekend goes along. Tulane has given up a first inning run in 22 games this year. And 5 straight, as I mentioned. So that's over half the season in which they're already starting off giving a team a run, either trailing right away at home, or they are trailing on the road, or maybe they give up a good start on the road because they give up a run. And so whatever that is, it's been a real problem for the Green Wave this year, and getting through that first inning. And then that's led to, you're not getting a lot of length from your starting pitching right now. And then Tulane hasn't found as many relievers as they would like to get through to 9 innings. And so the pitching staff's in flux, to say the least. When it is on, it's nasty. But when it is off, it can be a real detriment here. And we saw that the last time out in San Antonio.
Yeah, that's definitely one aspect of this week's matchup to keep a close eye on. ECU had 10 first-inning runs a week ago, including 2 4 spots. So I did not realize that about the Green Wave. Definitely appreciate you sharing that. And as I look at the league's defensive standings, ECU's already seen the league's top club with Charlotte, the 983 fielding percentage, and the 49ers were definitely flashing the glove that weekend when they took 2 out of 3 from the Pirates. I see the Green Wave 973 What can you tell us about Tulane defensively?
Yeah, it's pretty good. I mean, they started off the year rough. They did a California trip in the third weekend of the year, and when they came back from that, they had a 12-game homestand, and that was a pretty sloppy stretch defensively. That has calmed down. I mean, the infield is pretty strong now that. Kaikea Harrison has 10 errors at shortstop. We haven't talked much about him. That's a USC transfer who has made some major things happen over at short. But he'll let one get by from time to time. Connor's been very strong at second base. Tulane's kind of rotated first base a little bit. Matias Haas has pretty much taken over that mark there. And then the last couple of weeks, James Agabitis has taken over the third base starting spot. And, he kind of took that from Gavin Schultz, who's been the DH for most of the rest of the last couple of weeks here. Agabitis is slick with the glove. Like, he will make something happen this weekend that will just kind of open your eyes, the size of the moon. And so to get him over at third base has really solidified the infield defense. Hugh Pinckney's been good at catching runners. He's caught 7 runners this year behind the plate. And the outfield, with now it seems as though the outfield has kind of found its trio with Chun, with Wax, with Bryant. Chun and Wax are at very good speed. They've been able to track down a lot in the gaps here. They'll sometimes take freshman angles to baseballs, and so that will catch them a little bit off guard a little bit. And Theo's very good with the speed game as well. He made a terrific diving play to end the finale against UAB a couple weekends ago. And so it's pretty good. It's definitely improving from where it was in March when it looked a little bit shaky. But now that guys have kind of settled into roles, even if they weren't exactly the guys we thought they would be at the start of the year, the defense has kind of followed suit, and it's looked much stronger here over the last 4 weeks.
Now, looking at the American as a whole, this works out well from our standpoint because the Green Wave have already played Wichita State, UTSA, and South Florida, the other 3 remaining weekend opponents for ECU outside of Tulane. Let's start off with the league's first place team, UTSA. A few things that jumped off to me: 325 team batting average, and then they lead the league in from a pitching standpoint as far as walks and hit batters, so they don't beat themselves.
Yeah, that's a terrifying group. I mean, it's the fact that Tulane got 1 out of there was a victory. There's no doubt about it. That's just their second home loss of the year. Like, they're now 19-2 at home. So Tulane getting a win out of that, I think if you would ask Jay Ullman off the record, he'd probably say, that's what we were looking for here. He would love to have won a series, no question about it. That's the name of the game. But to get 1 was a barometer for this team. That lineup is unbelievable. And, East Carolina hosts UTSA, correct, Bubba?
We do. After this weekend, we go to Wichita State and then UTSA in Greenville, and then we close at South Florida, as we so often do before heading over to Clearwater.
Man, I mean, that's amazing. You guys just get to the short drive over to Clearwater. It seems like every year that happens here.
Right.
So, I mean, the fact that you get UTSA at home, with the way that offense plays, the way that ballpark plays, I don't know how much of an advantage that gives the Pirates outside of just what the crowd will probably be for that series. Mason Lytle will win Player of the Year, and deservedly so. I mean, James Tausig torched Tulane. A New Orleans kid who's new to the team this year, Norris McClure, the third baseman, he's Player of the Week this week. That's because he drove in 8 runs on Saturday's game, and he drove in, I think, 11 across the weekend. He was on base about 40 times, it felt like. Andrew Stuckey, the catcher, very solid. Drew Detlefson's the RBI leader. He's in left field, and he was batting 9th on Saturday. Like, that should tell you a little bit about what that lineup is. They don't swing at pitches off the plate. They just don't. And so for a team like Tulane, who walks too many batters for a team like East Carolina, who struggles with walks on the mound as well. Like, they're not going to let you off the hook with that sort of stuff. What's fascinating about the pitching staff, this is going to be the one thing to me about UTSA, where if they don't trip up the rest of the year, they're an at-large team. Like, no doubt. Their RPI is 30 right now. They should be in the mix. If they're going to make a run in Clearwater, I don't know if they have the pitching to do it. They have high quality arms. They don't have enough of them. They've only used 12 pitchers all year. And what they try to do is essentially do the piggyback start, where the starting pitcher goes 5 innings and then a reliever goes the next 4. Like, that's how they try and structure this here. Like, that's what happened with Robert Orlowski. Might be the best reliever in the league. He averages 3+ innings an outing. Zach Royce and Braylon Owens and Connor Miles, these guys are pretty much locked down the starting rotation there. You need quantity of arms to get through Clearwater. Like, even if you just get a couple of outs from someone you usually don't use, that is eventually going to come into play once you get to the weekend of Clearwater. That's how Tulane has been able to win the last couple of tournaments, is they've gotten outs on the mound, and just enough of them from guys that you weren't always expecting to get those types of outs from as the year progressed. UTSA does not have the depth on the mound, in my mind, to be able to do that. Now, they can win games 14-4 in Clearwater. Like, that ballpark plays to offense, and so they'll be able to succeed in that. But when you need to play 2 games on a Saturday, say, or win Sunday's championship game, when all your pitching's depleted, do they have enough bullets on the mound to do it? That's the one question I have about them. If they don't trip up over the last 4 weeks of the year, they won't really need Clearwater to be in the NCAA tournament. But if they do, like, if they drop the series to ECU, if they drop the series at South Florida right after that, I believe, they have Memphis and Rice at home. They can't lose any of those games to end the year. If they trip up, then they'll need Clearwater, and I don't know if they have the pitching quantity-wise to get through Clearwater. But that offense is unbelievable.
Although these series were not as fresh in your memory, Wichita State, that is the Pirates next weekend following Tulane. What can you tell me about the Shockers? I don't know exactly. I didn't, have the chance to study up on what they returned from a year ago, but I am very surprised. I think there's something like 11-27 at this juncture, and never would have seen that coming.
Yeah, that's a stunner. And they returned quite a bit from last year. That was a young lineup last year, and almost all of it came back. I'm still floored by what they are this year, because they were hurt and beat up to begin the season, but they're pretty healthy now, and it has just not come together. I mean, the one win that they got off of Tulane was because they got a sensational start from Grant Adler, and Luke Flatta was opposing him, and Flatta gave up 4 runs in the first inning, and that was pretty much all Wichita State needed. But Mauricio Millon's been around forever. The catcher, that's an all-conference player. Jordan Rogers, Josh Livingston, Jaden Gustafson, Lane Hayworth, Ryan Callahan, Cam Durnan. These guys were studs last year, and it has just not come together. That's the biggest shock to me in the league, and the fact that Wichita State, they have Memphis and Rice to end the year, if I have that right. But the fact that they're actually in position to miss the conference tournament after what they returned from last year's runner-up blows my mind. Now, they followed Tulane's trajectory last year too, where they turned it on in May and surged their way into Clearwater. They have the talent to do that. How it is not gelled together like this is pretty staggering, because there's no reason they should be in the position that they are, even though they were injured to begin the year.
And then East Carolina closes out the regular season against South Florida, as I mentioned, in Tampa, before heading over to Clearwater. The Bulls, a heck of a series with Charlotte, right after I had seen Charlotte the previous weekend against ECU. 3 very competitive games that all went down to the wire. and Charlotte was able to stave off the sweep in the finale with a 2-run win after being walked off in the series' first 2 games. What can you tell us about the Bulls?
Corey Braun, and he might be the best pitcher in the league. Trey Beard, I have something to say about that at Florida Atlantic too. Corey Braun pitched an absolute gem against Tulane a couple weeks ago. Sebastian Greco, the new first baseman there, I believe he's still tied for the conference high in home runs. He has been a great add, and it's the one team that started this year with a new coach. Rice changed hands middle of the season, obviously, with David Pierce, but all Mitch Hannah's ever did at Indiana State was win. And so to get this type of offense from a group that had a lot of changes in the lineup, Lance Triple at catcher had a terrific weekend against Tulane, but Marcus Brodell's been there for about 15 years, and he's having a strong year. He had one of the walk-off wins against Charlotte. That's a very well put together top to bottom team. Do they have enough in the back end of the bullpen to make a run through Clearwater? I think that's my one question about them. That lineup can beat you in a lot of different ways, and if they get a strong start on Friday from Corey Braun, then they are hard to beat in a weekend. And so to see them on a short week will be fascinating for East Carolina, because by that point there's only going to be one team in the league, Bubba, that will have to keep their rotation the same, and that's UTSA. UTSA can't afford to drop home games to Rice in the last weekend of the year if they want to stay in the at-large discussion. They're in a similar spot to what East Carolina's been in the last couple of years now. Everyone else can remake their rotation to set up for a run at the conference tournament. How South Florida does that they'll want Corey Braun to pitch game 1 in Clearwater. So what will that look like against East Carolina the weekend before on a Thursday, Friday, Saturday? That'll be fascinating to me. And all 9 teams outside of UTSA, the other 9 will be moving things around that weekend so they can make a charge in Clearwater. South Florida, that they have a Brandon Keister there on Saturday who's been pretty strong this year as well. That's a very complete team that Mitch Hannahs has, and I think it's surprising a lot of folks around USF just how strong they've been for most of this year, because I think there are a lot of unknowns in that roster, a lot of holes to fill, and they've been able to do so in the last weekend. What they did to Charlotte, like how those teams move from that weekend and how emotional that weekend was, I'll be fascinated to see, because that could be a weekend that really turns the tide for Charlotte in a bad way if they suffer the types of losses that they did.
Excellent information there, Corey. Really appreciate the thoughts on and the perspective with the Shockers, Bulls, and Roadrunners. And I really just, my gut feel says it's going to have to be a situation where a team gets on an unbelievable run, because I don't see the Roadrunners coming back to the field, so to speak.
What UTSA has left is, those 2 road weekends, they do East Carolina and South Florida back to back on the road. And so that's
Right.
going to be the telltale for them. If they go 4-2 across those 6 games, and that could even be sweeping one team and going 1-2 at the other. But if they wind up with a winning record after those 2 series, I think they're fine in terms of winning the regular season championship. If they split the 6, if they go 2-4, then things come back to the pack a little bit more for them. And then it creates, a little bit more heat on them, less to win a conference championship, but more to solidify their spot in the field of 64. And so, and that team, that's a lot of folks from last year's team are back for UTSA. That's a team that really folded like a lawn chair at the end of last year, and they flamed out in the conference tournament. And so if a little pressure gets put on them in May by the Pirates, by the Bulls, then they head into that final series of the year at home to Rice. And Rice is not very good, but they're playing better under David Pierce. Then it turns up the heat a little bit on a team that does not have a lot of postseason success under Pat Hallmark, and a group that last year did not handle the pressure well down the stretch. And so those 2 road trips for UTSA are going to be everything for them. If they're going to win this league in their second year, or if someone is actually going to come and catch them, because Tulane's only 4 games out of first. Getting a win at UTSA kept them in the mix a little bit here. They have to have a strong showing this weekend to really be in that discussion in the final 3 weeks of the year. But if UTSA, it's in their hands. If they fumble it, then you got 5 teams right behind that are poised to make a run at them.
We appreciate you being so generous with your time, Corey. As we're wrapping this up, I'll close with this. I mean, obviously, I hope things are going well for you down in New Orleans. You've certainly had an excellent football team, and then a pretty good basketball team, going 12-6 in the league, winning 19 games. Really like Coach Hunter, and a fairly solid baseball season to date. I noticed your Brewers are about a game and a half out of first in the NL Central, and then you have the NFL draft, just around the corner. So, and I believe you're a Bears fan, correct? So, any thoughts on the Brewers or Bears or anything of that nature before we wrap up?
I mean, yeah, the Brewers have kind of been what I thought they would be for a team that didn't add a single major leaguer in the offseason. They have been feast or famine with the offense. They've had a lot of injuries in the pitching staff. That happens every year, but they are very good at breeding pitchers in their farm system, and so they're able to kind of plug and play on the mound. The Bears, hey, they're doing smart things finally with Ben Johnson as the head coach, and so I'm definitely fascinated to see what this all starts to look like. Because boy, am I actually dying to see that organization go in a smart and correct direction. And so to get Ben Johnson and let him take the reins of this, he hired away Tulane's offensive line coach. Dan Rouchard was coaching here, and now he's coaching with the Bears. So that's been a fun little tie to folks here. But Tulane. The Bears are kind of being rumored around Ashton Genty. That would be, if they trade up, that would be certainly fascinating to me. I'm just glad that things are actually seemingly pointed in the right direction with the Chicago Bears. But before we go, and thanks for having me, Bubba, and this offshoot of what you do with the Pirate Baseball podcast. Congrats to Zach Agnos on getting the call up to the big leagues. I love that kid, and he had a great debut with the Rockies. So I'm very happy to see that Zach has made it up the ladder in such a quick amount of time, because that kid, that family, that they've worked diligently, to say the least, for an opportunity like that for him. And so I hope he continues to thrive, like so many former Pirates have been right now in the major leagues, like Gavin and Alec, and this generation that I was very lucky to be the voice of, to see these guys living out their dreams. And Zach, the most recent one, has been very cool.
Yep, 6 Pirates in the big leagues now, with Zach Agnos being the latest, and Carson Wisenhunt's pitching very well with AAA Sacramento, and he could be with the San Francisco Giants before too awfully long, which would give ECU seven Pirates in the MLB, which is obviously just a credit to what Cliff Godwin, Jeff Palumbo, Austin Knight, and staff have been doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think you said it perfectly right there. Like it's it's been a very good era of Pirate baseball, and now you're seeing a lot of those guys make their way to the major leagues, and that's ultimately the goal when you are playing in a program like what East Carolina has been the last decade.
Tell folks how they can follow you on X, as well as any other social media you may have.
At Corey Gloor on X, on Instagram. I mean, if you feel like listening to the series with my voice on it this weekend, the Varsity Network app is the way for you all in Greenville or Pirate Nation to do so. I won't exactly sound like I did 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 6 years ago, calling this particular series in Clark LeClaire. But if you want to tune in and yell at me, make fun of me, do whatever you want, say hi, like the old days, would love to have you.
Yep, definitely such great memories of that call of Travis Watkins' home run, as well as so many others. And I remember you said Coach Godwin was messing with you a little bit about your voice cracking on that home run in Charlottesville.
Yeah, I for a couple of years he what they kind of made fun of me about that, which is fair. Like it was it didn't just crack, it shattered.
Yeah, that was hey, but in my opinion, that didn't make the call any worse comment, or it was an excellent call, and that didn't take away from the call. That's what I was trying to say, because that was one that me and so many other hundreds of thousands of Pirate fans have gone back and watched and listened to time and time again. But Corey, appreciate it as always. Looking forward to catching up with you down the road. And Pirate Nation, we appreciate you tuning in. Be sure to follow us on social media at Jungle Tales Pod on X and Instagram. Like, follow, comment, subscribe as you see there on the screen. And we'll talk to you soon here on Jungle Tales. And as always, go Pirates.